Out with your beautiful faces, especially those on the tube. So yeah, my presentation is about MAP and Aspens. Okay, so why should we even care about Aspens? Well, first of all, they're friggin' awesome. They have traits of lower flammability, and also they have forest resilience. So yeah, they're freaking awesome. They're like these mega super organisms. Like, as you can see here with this one, it's actually one aspen, but it looks like there's 3 trees in it. And that's through a system called root suckering, where the aspens actually grow from the roots. And they're like one of the biggest species, and also people just love them. Like, when you walk through an aspen forest, it feels like you're walking through a lush, beautiful, like fairy forest, and that's good for tourism, economies, and local communities. And they have traits of lower flammability. So what that means, like, you can see this picture over here of the aspen patch. It's much more lush and full of vegetation and diversity as opposed to like a pine environment. That's due to like differences in soil acidity, and wildland firefighters themselves use aspens as little like safe spaces if they need to, or they would actually direct a fire towards the aspen patch to help slow it down. Not to say that aspens don't burn at all, but they do have a slower burning rate. And that could also potentially help communities if they want to protect their homes from wildfires. So the way aspens work with wildfires is when the forest burns down, they're opportunistic. So the roots will take opportunity of all this free open space, and they will shoot up a bunch of little saplings and take opportunity of this big space. The overall issue is wildfires. It's a human problem and affects both people and the ecosystem. And this is due to climate change and also the fact that people like to live in the woods or near flammable areas. Like when you're living near a flammable area in the woods, you don't want fires to be burning down your house, even though fires are a natural part of a forest. It helps clear out all the dead debris. So we stop wildfires, and that builds up a bunch of debris. And with climate change making things drier, that just creates these big, severe wildfires that put a lot of communities at risk. So people are looking at quaking aspens characteristics, the fact that they hold more moisture and kind of act as these fire buffers, just like living buffers. And like maybe you could like surround a town with a wall of aspens, and potentially that could help reduce fire severity risks around communities. So what we need to do is monitor aspens and identify the characteristics, or to help validate the characteristics they have. And one of the ways we do this is through mapping them out or monitoring them through satellite data and image classification, which is what CU Earth Lab has done. We created image classification using satellite data of the Southern Rocky Mountain ecoregion. This is our study area here. It's right in the middle of Colorado and parts of Wyoming and New Mexico. And if you don't know what image classification is, it's just like identifying the characteristics of 2 different subjects. So you can teach a computer the difference between like a cat or a dog, but in our case it's aspens and non-aspens. And there are aspen like maps that already exist or products, but the difference between our product and older products is that we're using higher resolution maps, which is Sentinel-2. Higher resolution satellites. And also we're only identifying just aspens. Whereas the older products use Landsat, which is a lower resolution satellite, and they identify like a myriad other different species. So it's kind of leaves room for error since they're not like precisely measuring aspens. And our goal is to assess the accuracy of our product and compare it to the older products. So we got our image classification, we got our maps, now we need to make sure it's working. So this is called validation. And it's like I'm a professor grading a student's test, and hopefully the student will take back the feedback and improve, but you never know. So the first type of validation is photo interpretation, which is what I've been doing. And I basically use Google Earth Engine, which is like Google Maps with steroids and encoding. And I zoom into each validation point that the computer identified as an Aspen. And so this is what the computer sees, all these pixels, and it can identify Aspen through like lasers and frequencies that I can't do that. So I use nape imagery, which is just a slightly better resolution for my little human brain to understand. And the way I try to classify aspens is just by texture, and also I can go to the season, see if leaves change. And here's like a good side-by-side of like an aspen forest to a pine forest. Another type of validation is citizen science. We use iNaturalist data. If you don't know what iNaturalist is, it's like a worldwide database of these cool, awesome plant nerds that like taking pictures of plants. And we found like 1,240 observations in our study area. And that's just a bunch of free data for us, so that's great. And the problem is, when a normal person takes a picture of an aspen tree, they're all like over here, you know, they give some aspen some breathing space. But what we want them to do is hug that tree and embrace that tree, but they don't do that. So we have to calculate in the distance for the computer, because the satellites, if they just took the point where the person took the photo, they would just see dirt, and then that would ruin our whole program. So up here you can see this graph. And this is like the furthest distance away. Someone's just like 60 meters away from taking a picture of an aspen, but like 85% of our pictures were like 10 meters away. So that's pretty good. That leaves a lot of opportunity for us to use iNaturalist for validation. And then the last type of validation we tested out is field-based validation, which is going out there in person, the old-fashioned way, seeing if there's a tree there or not. And you can use drones and remote sensing. So what does this all mean? So this graph can kind of be a little confusing, because you're like, well, this bigger percentage is on the lower graph and the rest of them are on the higher ones. What this is showing is the total area of aspen within our like study area. So this is our map. Even though we have a lower area, we have a higher accuracy. You can kind of see right here, this is our map. This like white highlighted areas is where the computer identified aspen. And it's much more precise and like clean as compared to like these other older maps. And that's just because like we just only classified just aspen, whereas like the rest of them, they were identifying like a myriad other different species, and also they were using lower resolutions. And this data here is only based off of my like photo interpretation. We didn't use iNaturalist or the field-based data, but we do want to. Okay, so what I want you to take away from this is that we created higher accurate maps of aspens, and we're also a step closer to providing like communities and people with possibly a viable opportunity to reduce fire severity around communities. And it's just mind-boggling, because there's so many different methods to explore with this, and like you just need to use like science. Like you see all these pictures of people here, but I see science, like these beautiful faces. This is science, and science is like just this big amalgamation of stories that connect to like repeating results. And I'm just so happy that I was able to be in these stories and do science. Thank you.